This is Mac OS Ken.
How the U.S. election might affect Apple, factors that might have held Apple shares in place on Wednesday, and new Apple Intelligence features for public testing peeps. It is Thursday, the 7th of November, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Incogni, helping you take back your personal data. Get 60% off an annual plan with code MacOSKen at incogni.com/MacOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. Apple CEO Tim Cook took to Twitter on Wednesday to congratulate the winner of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. In a suitably convivial post, the CEO said, "Congratulations, President Trump, on your victory. We look forward to engaging with you and your administration to help make sure the United States continues to lead with and be fueled by ingenuity, innovation, and creativity." Haven't spent much time on Twitter for the past couple of years, but a lot of the replies to Cook's well wishes were not pleasant, accusing Apple of trying to throw the election in favor of Vice President Harris and telling Cook to be a good boy. Gracious in victory as ever. Perhaps because investors like his policies, or maybe because they just like certainty, the markets and many stocks were through the roof on Wednesday. The Dow was up 1,500 points, the Nasdaq up 544, Microsoft up 8 3/4, Nvidia up 5 3/4, Google up nearly 7, and Apple was down 3/4 of a point. I cannot tell you why. I can only offer a few reasons as possibilities. Bloomberg says the EU is about to smack Apple with another hefty fine, so that was one possible reason. Apple issued a muted warning about future products, so that was there. And there was a note from Bernstein analyst Tony Sacconaghi saying Apple and other hardware companies could be hurt by tariffs telegraphed by the president-elect. Seeking Alpha built an article around Sacconaghi's note, pulling his quote, "Trump has pledged to raise tariffs, proposing a universal tariff of 10 to 20% across imported goods regardless of the country of origin, as well as a 60% tariff on all goods from China and as much as 200% on goods from Mexico." Pointing out that the incoming administration might be able to raise tariffs without congressional approval, the analyst went on to say if Apple did not raise prices and volumes were unchanged, proposed Trump tariffs could negatively impact company gross profits by an estimated 13% and earnings per share by $1.44 or 19%. The impact could be more pronounced if other countries, such as China, responded with their own tariffs on U.S. companies. Mr. Sacconaghi has an outperform rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $240. Interestingly, Neil Seibert at Above Avalon thinks Apple might be able to slip past the tariff trouble. Apple 3.0 ran part of what he wrote on Wednesday. A few weeks ago, says one excerpt, Trump publicly retold the story of how Apple was able to avoid tariffs during his first term by agreeing to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. The writer says his expectation is that we will see a similar dynamic play out over the next 4 years. While Trump will talk tough on tariffs, he will give exemptions to key U.S. companies, such as Apple, that play a role in elevating the U.S. as an innovation powerhouse. In return, Apple will need to do more in terms of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. That's part of the equation, though Seibert doesn't address the part where China may well respond with tariffs of its own. Speaking strictly business, the Above Avalon piece also sees a Trump administration offering relief for Apple from antitrust attacks by the DOJ, as well as more support for Apple from the U.S. government against the European Union. The second possible reason for Apple's freeze on an amazingly up day for Wall Street was that muted warning about future products I mentioned. The Financial Times ran a piece on Tuesday saying Apple has warned investors that future products may never be as profitable as its iPhone business as it pushes into unproven new markets such as artificial intelligence and virtual reality headsets. It is, well, I'm not sure if it's custom or requirement, to be honest, but every year in its annual report, the Cupertino company lists risk factors. These are things that might negatively affect Apple's business or bottom line. Added to the lineup this time around, Apple says new products, services, and technologies may replace or supersede existing offerings and may produce lower revenues and lower profit margins, which can materially adversely impact the company's business, results of operations, and financial condition. In other words, whatever ends up replacing iPhone may not make as much money as iPhone. Hey, remember that story from yesterday? The one that had Apple eyeing smart glasses? One is left to wonder whether a risk like this might be tied to a product like that. We'll get to the third thing that might have stopped Apple's shares in their tracks in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, Incogni, helping you take back your personal data. There are all kinds of reasons you might not want your data out there, and yet there are hundreds of companies collecting, collating, and selling information about us. Sure, they'll probably take our info down if we ask them, but you have to know who they are, what to say if they say no, and you have to have a lot of time. Or you could work with Incogni. Make an account, give them permission to work on your behalf, and Incogni requests data brokers remove your data, deals with any objections the data brokers may have, and keeps on doing it. Whenever a new record is created on a data broker's site, Incogni is ready with another removal request. Since I started with Incogni, they've gotten my info removed from over 120 data broker sites, saving me over 90 hours of work that I wouldn't even know how to start doing. And they can do the same for you. Whether you want to slow the flow of spam, stifle the annoying robocalls, or guard against identity theft, Incogni is ready to work with you and for you. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Get 60% off an annual plan with code MacOSKen at incogni.com/MacOSKen. They've got plans for individuals, as well as plans that cover friends and family, and they come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. INCOGNI. Join the huge number of people who have taken control of their personal data with Incogni. Get 60% off an annual plan with code MacOSKen at incogni.com/MacOSKen. The third thing that might have stalled Apple shares on Wednesday was that piece from Bloomberg I mentioned, the one that says the EU is about to smack Apple with another hefty fine. According to that site's Samuel Stolten, the Cupertino company is set to face the first ever fine under the European Union's new digital antitrust rules for big tech, representing an escalation of a clash with regulators over the dominance of its hugely profitable App Store. At issue, whether Apple allowed developers to steer users to cheaper deals and offers outside the App Store. Regulators seem to think they did not. That said, there is lots of uncertainty around this story, including how big the fine will be and when it might be levied. The piece says it could happen before Competition Commissioner Margareta Vestea leaves her post. That's supposed to happen at the end of this month, though. While that may be too soon, the secret sources with whom Bloomberg spoke do expect it to happen before the end of this year. As for how much, the report says under the law, EU regulators have powers to fine the world's most powerful tech firms 10% of their global annual sales, 20% in the event of repeated infringements, or periodic fines of as much as 5% of the average daily revenue. News of a feature expansion that comes with a built-in rhyme. Apple Insider says Apple Pay is live in Paraguay. A blog post from MasterCard indicates that the feature's been flipped on with 3 institutions: Banco Continental, Itaú, and Uno Bank. And finally today, the public OS beta train is once again pulling out of the station. Or into it? Mac Rumors ran a piece Wednesday saying the first betas of iOS 18.2, iPadOS 18.2, and macOS 15.2 had been ceded to Apple's public testing crew. Yes, these are the ones with the fun AI stuff like Image Playground, Genmoji, Image Playground, and ChatGPT integration for Siri and visual intelligence for people with a device from the iPhone 16 line. If you waited through the waitlist for the Apple Intelligence features in iOS 18.1, you will be familiar with what comes next: another wait. According to Mac Rumors, there is a secondary waiting list for early access to use Genmoji, Image Playground, and Image Wand. You can sign up to get access in Image Playground or in the areas where you access Genmoji or Image Wand. When you request access, the piece says you're added to a waitlist for all 3 capabilities, and you'll get a notification when the features are ready for you to use. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Incogni. Get 60% off an annual plan with code macOSKen at incogni.com/macOSken. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSken. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways: info@macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.